Portland Al. Old man, oh man, still ranting last summer behind the same counter where Elvis got to you one morning in 1957. Don't mean got to your head, though. That too, but mean found you. Walked into your store August 31st or September 1st. He couldn't remember. But it was one of those days. The 2 days when he was strangely alone and had time to kill around the train station. Either the day he arrived or the day he left, with the press all waiting for him at the wrong place the first time, the wrong time the second. And he had all the time to walk around by himself, just as you told me, in your grocery store just up the street at 3rd and Main. And that isn't tabloid stuff. You really had a grocery store, and on a corner were hot days filled with diesel smoke from the engines. Until last winter, when the place disappeared, and you with it. Wherever it went, the captain down with his ship, so to speak. And even the neighbors don't know what happened, though I asked around. I did. Was trying to find you again. And not only because of the 200,000 records you had jammed into your groceteria, with its can of milk, can of dog food, and boxes of Halls and Clorettes and Friedent, plus the odd Hawaiian shirt. About all there was room for. Couldn't get around real quick in the front part, though that was nothing to the back where the records were 10 feet high next to the stacks of phone books from Portland. 50 years of phone numbers, and you, the real Portland Al. The records could be replaced, even the autographed. Well, maybe not, but not you, who found your name driving up and down to Portland, where more jazz could be located within a day of Vancouver than anywhere else. And you bought it all, and boy, your car must have been low to the ground, barely moving up the highway. And it must have been fun at customs trying to explain that you'd bought 5,000 records since you went down the night before. And you looked like a gangster. Though later you'd look like a hippie, which you became in your old age, in your 60s or 70s, in the 80s or 90s. But that's later. And so the customs man would see you coming up the highway and say to himself, here he comes again, that gangster with his records, heavy driving it up from Portland, just as he did last week. There must be something to this. And he'd investigate, see, and never find anything. Just like 6 months ago when you disappeared, and it was I who was looking for you. But that's less than half the story. The other part is how every blues singer that ever came up to Vancouver found you in the grocery store, as the Coca-Cola sign above the door called it, with the photographs. Hundreds of musicians, big names and no names, standing behind your counter listening to you. So you had the proof when you said that the history of the blues walked into your store. Never mind the musicians who walked out of the blues, like Elvis, who found their way to you. And it's the late 50s and the early 60s where it really gets interesting. Like your stories about Hendrix when he was playing the Smiling Buddha on Hastings. About Jimmy in Vancouver before anybody had heard of him when he was playing in Bobby Taylor's band, the Vancouvers. And the others that were just beginning to guess that blues was the roots and rock the fruits. And they came in to buy some roots, and they'd carry some blues away, as everybody did from you, whether they bought anything or not. And they'd know they'd find at least one man in Vancouver who understood Portland. And you could explain everything about the nightclubs of Vancouver. The New Orleans, Cave and Izzy's, Quadra Club and Penthouse, Railway Club and Jazz Cellar, just up Main. And everyone who ever played the city, no matter, Father or Fats, Errol or Mingus, the Count or the Duke. And where rock began in Vancouver, the hotel pubs, no less than the Buddha. It was grounds up, of course, had to be. And the Retinal Circus on Davie, where a young man named Mick, last name Jagger, was left standing on the sidewalk, banging on the door. No kidding. You couldn't make this up. Nobody would let him in. Everybody too stoned inside to hear him. The circus, where Jim Morrison did get in, and Joplin too. She did. And also Empire Stadium, where she smashed her bottle into the mic on the stage where Elvis had played Saturday, August 31st, 1957. The only time he ever came to Vancouver, and you could connect everything because it was all happening at once, all together. Even the after-hours clubs, like the one on Commercial where Vi's husband used to lose his money and win it back over and over playing poker on the weekend. But the chili was hot enough to keep half of them playing 48 hours straight, and then Monday morning, off to work. And what a day that must have been, all across the city, while Vi just cooked her chops. Cooked her chops, or cooked her steaks and chops, because those were the only choices, you understand. Her restaurant was in her living room, don't you know? So she didn't have a big kitchen. But you had all the records. You did. Just up the street from her. You had Mean Old Bug Blues, and Somebody's Been Borrowing That Stuff, and Careless Love, and Keep What You Got. And you never made the papers, though you were famous, sort of, amongst the legends, who'd have been the first to understand how you can be famous, yet invisible. Then, just disappear.